each letter in the xylo for the corresponding number in the alphabet becomes the correct answer, which is B. So the correct answer is B. Second question. In a big basket, there are 10 bags. Each one of them contains a different number of chocolates from 1 to 10. 5 kids pick from the basket 2 bags each. Alex gets 5 chocolates, Ben 7, Chris 9, and Daisy 16. How many chocolates does Emily find in the last 2 bags? Well, here you need to calculate the number of all the chocolates. In all the bags, you add up the numbers from 1 to 10, and so the result is 55, because you're doing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and etc. To know the number of chocolates that Emily finds, you need to subtract the number of total chocolates minus the number of what the other kids get. And so minus 5, 7, 9, and 16, and the result is 18. So the correct answer is E. Number 3. Every architect can draw. Jacob is an architect. Someone who uses AutoCAD is an architect. If the previous information are true, which one of the following sentences is not necessarily true? The sequence of relationship is established so that someone who uses AutoCAD is an architect and therefore can draw. From this reasoning, we can say that A and D are not the right answers. And who uses an AutoCAD is an architect, and if you can't use it, you can't be an architect. So therefore, in the end, the correct answer is B. Someone who doesn't use AutoCAD is not an architect, because we established that in order to be an architect, you need to be able to use AutoCAD. Complete the sequence. In this was a simple sequence in which we did the 22 multiplied by 2 minus 17, which is 27. So the correct answer is B. Number 5. Complete with the right couple. Bizarre stands to like X stands to worn out. In this case, the answer was A. So extravagant, which is a synonym for bizarre, and shabby, which is a synonym for worn out. So the correct answer is A. Now, we have a table here. This table shows the number of people aged 20, 35, 36, 50, 51, 65 who enjoyed a range of beauty treatments in a beauty center on a Saturday. In which of the other treatments was the proportion of the clients in 3 ages ranges closest to that for the face massage? Here you had to calculate the proportion for each one, and in the end, the correct answer was E. So acupuncture. Okay, 7. Here we had a text, and you need to find which statement cannot be inferred from the article. When you infer something from an article, it means that you are able to find a certain information just by reading it. So you need to try and find something that is already written in the big text. In this case, the correct answer is B, because after the first dose, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention stated that the second dose should be administered within a 21 to 28 day interval starting from the first dose. So correct answer is B. 8. In spring, Rose is so happy since she can revitalize her vegetable garden. They proliferate so fast, and Rose takes notes of the amount of plants at the end of each week, beginning from the 1st of April, and so on. 3 at the end of the first, 6 at the end of the second, 15 at the end of the third, 42 at the end of the month. According to this trend, how many plants does she find in the vegetable garden at the end of the first week of May? So we have a function here in which n is new week, where n is the former week multiplied by 3 minus 3. Therefore, if we do this for each week until the last day of May, it is n equals 42 multiplied by 3 minus 3 equals 126 minus 3 equals 123. So the correct answer is A. 9. Complete the syllogism with the right sentence. No logic teachers are kind people. Some dictators are kind people. In this case, the correct answer is A, because there are no logic teachers that are kind, so we can assume that if the dictator isn't kind, he can't be a logic teacher. Okay, last question. The sprockets in the following system are free to rotate around a fixed spin. If sprocket C turns clockwise, in which direction does sprocket F turn? The correct answer is C, because we have two rules. First rule, two adjacent sprockets rotate in the opposite directions, and second rule, two sprockets, if one is inside the other, rotate in the same direction. So the correct answer is C, in the opposite direction to sprocket B. Okay, now I'll leave for the rest of general knowledge to Chiara. Chiara, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, so I'm Chiara. I'm from the first year of Medicine and Surgery. I'm going to revise the general knowledge questions. Okay. In which city were the 1968 Summer Olympics held? So we know that Tokyo was supposed to hold the Olympics in 2020, but was postponed to 2021 due to COVID. So LA hosted the Olympics in 1932, 1984, and is going to host the Olympics in 2028. 2028. Paris is going to host the Olympics in 2024. Rio hosted the Olympics in 2016. So the correct answer is A. And Mexico City held the Olympic Games. Which of the following is not a work of Plato? So we know that all these works are from Plato, except for the Nicomachean Ethics, which is from Aristotle. So correct answer is D. Identify the correct relation. The correct answer is D. So pound is not correlated with temperature because they are all units of measurement linked to corresponding physical quantity. And pound measures mass and not temperature. So this is correct answer. Where was the famous painter Vincent van Gogh born and raised? Vincent van Gogh was born in Zandert in the Netherlands, and he studied in Brussels and spent most of his life in Paris and Arles. So the correct answer is A. He was born and raised in the Netherlands. Which of these events occurred in the 18th century? So the 30 Years' War was fought from 1618 to 1648. Boston Tea Party occurred in 1773. The first edition of the modern Olympic Games in Athens were held in 1856. And the Bay of the Pig invasion occurred in 1961, and the Battle of Waterloo was fought in 1815. So the correct answer is B. And the only event that occurred in the 18th century was the Boston Tea Party. The author of the dystopian romance 1984 was, correct answer is E, George Orwell, because Charlotte Bronte was a novelist and wrote Jane Eyre. Thomas Eliot was a poet. Agatha Christie wrote thriller, was a famous thriller writer, and Spielberg is a film director, so the correct answer is E. Which one of the following US presidents declared the war on drugs in 1971? We have to remember that in 1971, the president was Richard Nixon, who served from 1969 to 1974. So the correct answer is C, Richard Nixon. And he declared the war on drugs in June 1971 with a publication of a special message to the Congress on Drug Abuse Prevention and Control, during which he declared drug abuse public enemy #1. So the correct answer is C. How many member states are there in the Commonwealth of Nations? In the Commonwealth of Nations, there are 54 members, so the correct answer is D. Who was Winston Churchill succeeded by as a Prime Minister of the UK in 1955? The correct answer is D. He was succeeded by Anthony Eden. Which of the following is nowadays the tallest building in the world? So the ones that are not finished yet are not to be considered. The right answer is C. Burj Khalifa in Dubai is the tallest building, tallest completed building with a height of 828 meters, while the Jeddah Tower, when construction will end, will be the tallest building in the world with a height of 1,000 meters. Where is Benghazi located? So Benghazi is a key Mediterranean seaport and is located in Libya. So the correct answer is D. It's also the second most populous city of Libya. Who invented the polymerase chain reaction, PCR? So the polymerase chain reaction was invented in 1983 by Kary Mullis, who was a biochemist. So the right answer is A. Okay, so now we are going to correct the biology questions.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Now, the fermentation is an oxidation, transforms glucose into lactate, produces lactate under aerobic conditions, and under aerobic conditions can produce alcohol. That is correct answer. So, the first statement, it says that it's an oxidation. So basically, it's a reaction because NADH molecules attach H to the two pyruvate molecules that were produced at the end of glycolysis, and in order to create, of course, at the very end, two lactate molecules. Now, the second one says that it transforms glucose into lactate, which is the correct statement. So, as you see, it turns it into lactate. Now, the third one says that it produces lactate under aerobic conditions, which is incorrect because it produces lactate under anaerobic conditions. If it was aerobic, let's say, go for the Krebs cycle or another one, yeah. So, and the fourth statement states that under anaerobic conditions, it can produce alcohol, and that is true as well. I mean, at the end, it makes lactic acid. So the correct answer is C. Now, the permeability transition pore, long studied in pattern laboratories, is an ionic channel located on the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. It is believed to correspond to an ATP synthase that starts working in reverse, which may be the direct effects of this inversion. So in order to answer this question correctly, you would have to first know how the normal process of ATP synthase works in order to think correctly the inverse of this process. So basically, so the ATP, the A choice says that the ATP is consumed instead of being produced. Now, in normal process, the ATP is produced. So we could say that this is a correct, this is a true statement. Now, this stops in the B choice. It says sudden stop of protein translation. Now, it is irrelevant to the functioning of ATP synthase. So this cannot be a correct statement. Now, in the C section, the proton gradient is dissipated, thus reducing the functionality of the respiratory chain. Now, this is a correct statement as well. The reason for it is that in the normal functioning of ATP synthase, a proton gradient is crucial, and it is the very basic of the functionality of ATP synthase. And the osmotic lysis is irrelevant again. So the D is the correct answer. Now, Lac Operon is a particular type of enzyme that solves lactose molecules, typically used by plants, a bacterial functioning unit of DNA transcription, secreted near the mammary glands, and active in the first stages of human life. Now, the correct answer is C. The reason for it is that, so basically in the A choice, a particular type of enzyme that solves lactose molecules is actually lactase. And and typically, so it's B is irrelevant again because it's the plants, it's just irrelevant. The C, a bacterial functioning unit of DNA transcription. As we said, I'll come to this. Yeah, I'm sorry. So D is secreted near the mammary gland. It is lactose instead of Lac Operon. So it's in this question, it's just it says it gives statements that are related with like lactose or lactase. So it's trying to trick you, but actually it's C. So it is a transcriptional unit of bacteria, which is involved in lactose metabolism. So basically, okay, in order to explain the scheme here, LAC-Z codes for the enzyme beta-galactosidase, which splits lactose into glucose and galactose. Now, LAC-Y, on the other hand, codes for a permease protein that allows lactose to enter the cell, again, involved with the lactose metabolism. Now, LAC-A encodes for an enzyme that acetylates lactose, beta-lactose acetate. And so these were the gene transcribing, gene coding regions. Now, the cap site is counted as a control region, and basically its full name is catabolically activated protein, and it acts as a glucose sensor. So it senses the glucose around it, like in the environment, and yeah. So when the glucose levels are low, it activates transcription of the operon. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, which of the following mutations usually leads to a truncated protein? So the truncated protein means the protein that was cut short. So so in order to remember, I'm sorry, I'm first. The first is nonsense mutation, second is missense mutation, silent mutation, and frameshift mutation. So nonsense mutation is the premature stop codon. Oh, yes, that is okay. And missense mutation. So after, so I call the new amino acid that was created by the mutation the new codon. So the new codon after the mutation encodes for a different amino acid that was different from what was previously expressed. So the third one, silent mutation, means that after the mutation, the amino acid expression doesn't change. So it is the same as the old one. And the frameshift mutation is either an insertion or deletion of a base pair or base pairs that changes yeah, basically that's it. And it also changes the sequence downstream. So for a protein to be truncated, it has to be, yeah, as I said, it has to be like cut short. So basically the premature stop codon provides us that. And the other ones just either change, in the case of like missense and frameshift, either changes the sequence, or in the case of the third one, silent mutation, it doesn't change it at all. So I mean, it changes, but the base changes. That's just it. I mean, the amino acid doesn't change again. So okay, okay. Now, which of the following statement is correct about epistatic genes? Now, their expression is silenced by another gene. They code for epiphysis. They are a form of non-Mendelian inheritance. They are frequently involved in homeostasis, and none of the above. None of these. Okay, so the correct answer here is C, because to remind you of the Mendelian inheritance laws, the first law is the law of dominance and uniformity. So as you guys might recall, Mendel crosses two homozygous pea plants, one of them being only dominant and one of them being only recessive. So at the very end, he gets like heterozygous progenies, which are all dominant, which are all expressing a dominant phenotype. So, so he comes up with the law of dominance and uniformity with this experience. Now, for the second law, the law of character segregation, again, he crosses the first generation and sees that actually there's a ratio between the dominant phenotype individuals in the second generation and the recessive ones between each other. So he gets a ratio of 3 divided by 4 of dominant phenotypes. And just, I mean, yeah, just to briefly explain it. And the third law, which is the law of independent assortment, which states that the characteristics are transmitted to offspring independently of each other. So basically, it doesn't contain anything about epistatic genes. So this is the correct answer. So the B choice is irrelevant again. It's just, I mean, to my thinking, it was just put there to trick people to thinking that epistatic might have some correlation with epiphysis. Again, so their expression is silenced by another gene. So for a gene to be epistatic, we have to think about two processes. So let's say that X is the reactant of a reaction that happens in step A, and which produces Y as a compound, as a molecule. And Y is the reactant of the reaction of the step B, which produces Z. So, and let's say that if gene A regulates step A and gene B regulates step B. So Also, we have to think about null mutations as well. These mutations will arrest the gene A, which will consequently arrest the step A completely. Now, if gene A, so, okay, now, when, so these happen in an order. So first the step A happens and then the step B happens. So if, for example, a null mutation was to mutate gene A, then step A wouldn't happen at all. But I mean, regardless of what happens in step B. So if a null mutation mutated gene B, then again, step B wouldn't happen. But for it to matter, first of all, for it to matter, gene A has to be, should not be mutated. So in this case, we could say that gene A is epistatic to gene B. And in this way, by doing the epistatic analysis and by using this technique, we can understand the mapping of genes regardless of their mechanism. So yeah, so this is extremely useful in biology. Yeah. Okay, tricarboxylic acid cycle occurs whenever the cell decides to. It's carried out by 8 enzymes, occurs only in the bacterial cytoplasm, reduces NADH to NAD+, and then results in 4 molecules of ATP, 2 of water, and 2 of FADH2. Now, so the correct answer is B. The reason for it is that, so the tricarboxylic acid cycle doesn't occur whenever the cell decides to. It starts when the acetyl-CoA combines with oxaloacetate. So it doesn't happen whenever the cell wants to. So it is carried out by 8 enzymes. So we would have to inspect the some schemes in order to see that. So in the option C, occurs only in the bacterial cytoplasm. So now this is wrong as well. So it occurs in the mitochondrial matrix, first of all. So that's it. And reduces NADH to NAD+. Now this is the exact opposite. So NAD+ is reduced to NADH, and at the very end, we obtain 3 molecules of NADH, 1 molecule of FADH2, and 1 molecule of ATP. And that's it. Okay. Which of the following statements regarding adenosine triphosphate is correct? It is classified as a nucleotide triphosphate. It can be produced by glycolysis, the oxidative phosphorylation, and beta oxidation. It consists of 3 components, a nitrogenous base, inosine, the sugar ribose, and the triphosphate, and it is one of 4 monomers required in this DNA synthesis only. So the correct answer is C. The reason for it is that it is classified as a nucleoside triphosphate. If there was a classification such as a nucleotide triphosphate, we would have to think really simple, because a nucleotide, again, includes a phosphate group, a sugar group, and a nitrogenous base. Basically, if we had 3 phosphates, so triphosphate, and a nucleotide, we will have in total 4 phosphate groups, which will make sense. So it would have to be, the correct one is nucleoside triphosphate, which at the very end would have 3 phosphates, which would make sense, basically. It can be produced by glycolysis, the oxidative phosphorylation, and beta oxidation. So this is true again. So basically, so for the third statement, it consists of 3 components: a nitrogenous base. First of all, inosine is not a nitrogenous base; it is a nucleoside, and it consists, so this is completely incorrect, and the right one is adenine as a nitrogenous base. So the sugar ribose is correct, and the triphosphate, which is again correct. And it is one of 4 monomers required in the DNA synthesis. So by monomers, it means a nucleotide, and which is incorrect again. So it is only C. And yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about beta oxidation. Beta oxidation, to briefly explain it, is the breakdown of fatty acids through the successive removal from one end of 2 carbon units. So, okay, now I will leave it to my colleague Giovanni. Is he here? Okay, I think I have to go. Proceed. 4 students discuss transcription and translation. Marta says that the transcription always requires RNA maturation, that as a rule, in the prokaryotes. The translation occurs at the same time as the transcription, and that all RNAs are destined to be translated into proteins. Sulle says that RNA maturation occurs only in prokaryotes, that in the RNA transcript, each guanine of the DNA will be placed with thymine, and disapproves Marta's third statement by taking our RNA as an example. Oh, sorry. Marta says that the RNA maturation occurs only in eukaryotes, that each thymine of the DNA is replaced with uracil, and agrees with Sylvia that not all RNAs are coding for proteins. Jonathan says that splicing is always required in order to create an mRNA molecule that can be translated into protein, and agrees with Sylvia's second and Martha's third statements. So which of them got it wrong in all statements? Now the correct answer is E, because transcription doesn't always require RNA maturation. For example, it doesn't take place in prokaryotes, and it happens only in eukaryotes, basically. And then RNA maturation occurs only in prokaryotes. Again, it is incorrect. Splicing is always required in order to create an mRNA molecule that can be translated into protein. This is wrong, so incorrect. Okay, each G of the DNA is replaced with, each guanine of the DNA is replaced with thymine, so this is completely wrong. And all RNAs are not proteins. For example, there was this theory called like one gene, one protein thing, which was basically at the very end, incorrect. So the some RNAs are not necessarily translated in proteins. For example, long non-coding RNAs, as said in the slide. Yes, splicing again is always required. It's wrong because of the exception in prokaryotes. So, okay, how many amino acids cannot be synthesized by the human body? So the correct answer here is B, because there are 20 amino acid types, and there is a subclass of amino acids called essential amino acids. So the essential amino acids are the amino acids that we get from what are nutrients, basically, so which we cannot synthesize in our body. So the correct one is B. And so here is the 9 essential amino acids: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. Okay. Now, ethanol is a product of alcoholic fermentation. Okay. So I will leave it to my colleague here. Okay.
So hi, good morning, everybody. I'm going to correct the other few questions about biology. Okay, just okay. So okay, as you have seen, how many amino acids can be synthesized by the human body? Is the correct answer is 9, because 9 are the essential amino acids. So let's talk about question 32. Ethanol is a product of alcoholic fermentation, can be formed in prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells, prions, viruses. Choose the correct answer. So let's jump to the right one, which is C, 1 and 2, just because the alcoholic fermentation requires a group of enzymes which are not present in prions and viruses, which can they just reproduce each other entering in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So the correct one is C, as I said. As you can see, some enzymes which transform glucose to pyruvate and then to lactate are not present in viruses and prions. Given this family tree, indicate which line of the table contains the correct information in regard to the disease. Please note that the three last columns indicate the genotype of the individuals involved. So about this family tree, let's jump again to the correct answer, which is line 1, and I'm going to explain why. As we can see, the dominance, looking at the family tree, dominance is easily, we can easily find which is recessive, because a recessive disease, just only a recessive disease can be passed to a son and to a daughter with the parents that have not one of them. So if it was dominant, even one or two, the person 1 and 2 about the first generation would have the disease. So it can only be recessive as the dominance. Then about the transmission, it can only be autosomal, because both son and daughter are have the disease, with the parents which have not disease. And at this point we can easily understand the genotype of the parents of the first generation, which is clearly heterozygous for both of them, and from this few information we can see that the line 2, line 4, and line 3 are not possible. So the only remaining possibility, which is line 1, with dominance recessive, transmission autosomal, and the individual of the first and second individual of the second generation, which are clearly recessive, and because they are heterozygous, and the first person of the third generation, which is homozygous recessive, which has the disease. So about question 34, given the following combination, choose the one that correctly indicates which elements are exclusive only of prokaryotes and which only to eukaryotes. Some of them are common to both types of cells. So as you can see, the correct answer is D, because the nuclear pore complex, if we have a nucleus just eukaryotic cell can have a nucleus, so it's not possible that nuclear pore complex we can find it in prokaryotes. The centromere, again, it's possible to find it in eukaryotes and prokaryotes, but it's not present in both of them in any question, in any answer. A nucleotide is, we can find nucleotide both in prokaryotes and eukaryotes. A ribosome in both of them too. Cytoskeleton in eukaryotes mostly. Histones just only in eukaryotes. Plasmid only in prokaryotes. Introns only in eukaryotes. A nucleoid only in prokaryotes, and the sex too. So as we can see, in the correct answer, 1, 8, and 6. So nuclear pore complex, introns, and histones, as I said, both the three of them can be found only in eukaryotes, whereas 9, so a nucleoid, the sex pilus and plasmid can be found only in prokaryotes. So about the last question of biology, 35, which of the following enzymes are involved in DNA replication? Telomerase, topoisomerase, primase, RNA polymerase. So let's jump to the correct question, which is D. And the explanation is telomerase, topoisomerase, and RNA polymerase are the all three involved in DNA replication, whereas the primase synthesize an RNA primer. So it just is needed to just to form a bind, a new two strands of DNA which are not binded. Thanks for the attention, everybody. And I'm leaving the correction to my other colleagues.
Okay, here we go. So once again, good morning, everyone. My name is Bueno. I'm a sixth-year medical student in Padua, and I'm going to guide you through the correction of the anatomy and physiology part. So before we start, just a quick reminder, if you have any questions or doubts, you're free to write them down in the comment section, and I'll check for and reply to your questions at the end of my presentation in case there are any questions. So let's start. Immediately. Okay. So in the first question, you were asked to identify among these three structures the ones that go into regression after birth among the foramen ovale, the ductus arteriosus, and the umbilical artery. It is evident here that we are referring to cardiovascular structures of the fetus. So in this picture, you have a visual representation of the fetal vessels, and there are many differences to point out between the fetal circulation and the adult or post-birth circulation. In particular, the main differences are that the lungs here are not working at all during fetal life because the fetal does not breathe during fetal life. In fact, the gas exchange function is replaced here by the placenta, which is essential to gas exchange, which occurs between the fetus blood and the mother's blood. And here you can see the main vessels here are the umbilical arteries and the umbilical vein, which originate in fact from the descending aorta and not from the pulmonary artery, which are not working in the fetus simply. And so the other main difference is that there are a series of bypass to connect the blood that arrives to the right part of the heart directly to the left part, and in particular to the descending aorta, in order to direct the blood to the umbilical arteries for the gas exchange. And these bypasses are the ductus arteriosus, which you can see here. And then we have which is a channel, in fact, that connects the pulmonary arteries directly to the aorta, because the blood, as I said before, shall not advance to the lungs. Otherwise, it is just lost. And then we have the foramen ovale, which is a connection between the two atria, in which blood flows according to a pressure gradient from the right side to the left side. So here is what happens after birth. In fact, the main event is that after birth, the newborn starts to breathe, and there are a series of changes that occur. So first of all, we have two effects from the first breath. That is the pulmonary vasculature resistance decrease. There's an immense, tremendous decrease in the pulmonary vasculature resistance because of the expansion of the lungs given by the first breath. And this results also in an increase of the pressure in the left atrium, because conversely, in the right atrium, there's a tremendous decrease. In fact, the pressure in the right atrium becomes about a third or a fourth of the pressure in the left atrium, and that makes the foramen ovale to close. In fact, this is not a real closure. In fact, the foramen ovale is still open during life. But the pressure gradient, which generates between the left and the right atrium, makes in fact him close, so there's no more blood that flows from an atrium to the other. The second effect of the first breath is the blood concentration in oxygen that dramatically increases, and that makes the prostaglandins to decrease, which makes also the ductus arteriosus to close. Finally, the last effect is that the last event is that the umbilical cord is clamped and cut off, so the connection between the placenta and the fetus is interrupted, and all the umbilical vessels, the umbilical arteries and the umbilical vein go into regression by fibrosis. So to sum up, we can say that all these structures, the foramen ovale, the ductus arteriosus, and the umbilical artery go into regression. So as you can see, the correct answer is A, 1, 2, and 3. So moving on to the next question. You are asked, in fact, how the body is divided by a sagittal plane. Of course, the main notion, the fundamental notion to know here, in order to answer correctly, is how many planes are there that divide the human body. So here in this slide, you can see that we have 3 planes that divide the human body. We have 2 vertical plane and an horizontal one. We have the sagittal plane, which is the one you are asked, a coronal or frontal plane, and finally a transverse plane. So as you can see, the coronal plane is a vertical line which divides the body into a front section and a back section. It is this blue plane. So you have a front section, an anterior section, and a back section or a posterior section. Then you have a transverse plane, which is this one colored in red, which is in fact a horizontal line which divides the body into an upper section and a lower section, or we can say anatomically into a superior section and a lower section. In fact, we have multiple transverse planes, so we can have one transverse plane here, but another upper transverse plane, etc., etc. Moving on to the sagittal plane, the one you were asked, it is in fact this plane colored in orange. It is a vertical line that divides the body into a left section and a right section. And notably, we have the median plane, the one in green, which is called also mid-sagittal plane, which bisects the body vertically through the midline, which is marked by the navel, and it divides the body exactly in a left side and a right side. So here you have the correct answer, which is B. The sagittal plane, as I told you before, divides the body into a right side and a left side. So question number 38. Here you're told that blood performs many important functions within the body. It is true, but you are also asked which of the following functions is not a function which is carried out by blood. So this is just to remind you the normal composition of blood. You have in fact the blood after centrifugation, which is divided into the plasma sections, which covers around 55% of the total blood, and it is made by water mainly, but then there are many proteins, glucose, ions, hormones, carbon dioxide, etc., etc. And then the other 45% approximately is the cellular part, we can call it, which is mainly formed by red blood cells, with other cells like leukocytes, white blood cells, and platelets or thrombocytes. So back to our functions. Let's analyze them separately. So of course, we all know that the main function which is carried out by the blood is the supply of oxygen to tissues. This is made possible by hemoglobin. So we have oxygen, which comes from lungs, that binds to the many hemoglobin molecules in the red blood cells, and this binding allows the blood, in particular the red blood cells, to supply oxygens to peripheral tissues. Then we have coagulation, which is another important function carried out by blood. In fact, coagulation is more a complex series of events that occur in blood vessels, and these events activate in response to damages that may occur in blood vessels. There are many damaging signaling that may occur and that may activate the the coagulation or the blood clotting mechanism, as it is named here. And in fact, you have this function that makes the blood convert into a semi-solid gel, and in summary, in fact, it is useful to stop bleeding. Then we have immunological functions, because as we've said, as I said before, in blood, other than red blood cells, there are many white blood cells circulating. White blood cells, so some from the innate immunity, like the granulocytes, the basophil, the eosinophil, the neutrophil. Then we have the NK cells, the mast cells. We have some cells by like the macrophages and the dendritic cells, which present the antigen to the cells of the adaptive immunity, like B cells and T cells. And in fact, their function in general is to identify foreign materials and to activate different mechanisms of response in order to clear pathogens and, in general, foreign materials from blood and from the human tissues. Then we have a messenger function. In fact, blood has also this function, because in blood there are many hormones, many signals of tissue damage that circulate in it. So we can say that in general, blood carries out also a messenger function. This leads us to a function that we have not mentioned up to now, which is in fact the removal of glucose amino acids and fatty acids, because in fact blood does not remove nutrients such as them, while on the contrary, in fact, it provides them. You can see here it supplies nutrients to the peripheral tissues, and on the contrary, in fact, it removes waste such as carbon dioxide, such as urea, such as lactic acids, etc. So to sum up, in fact, the correct answer here is B. So removal of glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids is not correct. It's not a blood function. On the contrary, it would be supply of glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. Okay, next question. This question, in fact, is centered on oxytocin. In particular, you are asked about the production and release of oxytocin, and you ask which of the organs mentioned here are directly involved in its production and release. So regarding oxytocin, we can say that it is one of the many hormones which are part of the hypothalamo-hypophyseal axis. And in fact, it is an hormone that is produced by the hypothalamus, by two nuclei of the hypothalamus, the supraoptic here and the paraventricular here. And then the oxytocin produced is driven down all the way down to the posterior pituitary by these so-called magnocellular neurons, and finally it is released in the bloodstream, in the blood flow in the posterior pituitary. So as we can see, the correct options here are 3 and 4. So posterior pituitary and hypothalamus. Regarding the other options, in fact, of course, option 2 is incorrect, is wrong, because oxytocin does not pass through the anterior pituitary. While regarding option 1, so the breasts, in fact, it is wrong because it is not directly involved in the production and release, However, in fact, it is to be noted that the suction here of the nipple by the baby while feeding is a process that creates a positive feedback, which goes all the way up to the 2 nuclei in the hypothalamus and increases, in fact, the production of oxytocin by the hypothalamus. So, in fact, this option is incorrect in the sense that breasts are not directly involved, while they are involved in an indirect manner by this system of positive feedback. So, as I told you before, the correct answer here is D, with options 3 and 4 that are the only ones correct. So the final question, here you are asked where we can find a meniscus among the joints named here. So the hip, the knee, the elbow, the wrist, and the ankle. So first of all, what is a meniscus? A meniscus, here you have the definition, is a crescent-shaped fibrocartilaginous anatomical structure which is interposed between two bone surfaces that are differently shaped. And in fact, the meniscus is interposed between them to enhance their congruence, to disperse friction, and to enhance overall the overall stability of the joint. You are told also that a meniscus only partly divides a joint cavity, so it is not like the intervertebral discs which cover all the joint cavity or the bone surfaces, but it only partly divides a joint cavity. And here you have, in fact, the representation of the two main and perhaps only menisci that we can find in human joints, which are the menisci in the knee. We have two menisci, a medial one and a lateral one, which in fact increase congruence between the femoral condyles, which are the upper surfaces, and the tibial plateau in the lower part of the joint, of the knee joint. You can recognize them because the medial meniscus has a C shape, while the lateral meniscus is O-shaped. And now I'll quickly show you the other joints, which of course do not include menisci in them. So we have the hip, which is one of the most mobile joint. This is possible thanks to the hemispheric surfaces of the head of the femur and of the acetabulum. So the head of the femur, which is like a sphere, and the hemispheric surface in which this sphere is hosted, which is the acetabulum. Then we have the elbow, which is a quite particular joint. It is a hinge joint between the humerus here. And then you have the radius and the ulna in the forearm. The radius, which is the lateral bone, and the ulna, which is the medial bone of the forearm. Then we have the wrist, which is called also which is also called radiocarpal joint, and which connects the radius, the lateral bone of the forearm, and the carpus. And finally, similar to the wrist, we have the ankle, which includes in fact 3 joints, so the talocrural, the subtalar, and the inferior tibiofibular. So here you have the correct answer, which is B, the knee. And okay, so now I'll check for your questions in case there are any of them. Okay, so it seems we have no questions. So that's all for today for the anatomy part, and we hope we thank you for your attention, and we hope to see you again soon. And now I'm pleased to hand over to my colleagues for the chemistry part. Bye bye.
Hello guys, my name is Anna. I'm a first year medical IMAT student, and I'm here to solve the first part of chemistry. Just gonna share my screen real quick, and then we can start. Let me do this. Okay. So first question, oxygen is an element that presents 3 stable isotopes, 16, 17, and 18. Considering that these isotopes are present in a 99, 76, 004, and 02 ratio, what's the final atomic weight of oxygen? And then over here you have the alternatives. In order to solve this question, you have to do the average of the masses that were presented to you, and the proportions where they are located in. You just plug all the information given to you in this formula over here, and remember to divide this per 100, so you can obtain the value, which is over here. You just have to do that, and then you just do the math. You obtain the correct answer, A. So here you can see answer A is the correct one. The second question says, which of the following elements is not an halogen? So chlorine, fluorine, iodine, bromine, and oxygen are the alternatives. And for this question, you have to remember that halogens are identified in the periodic table as the 7th main group of the 17th vertical column. They all have 7 electrons on their valence shell, and there is 1 electron away from the octet. Remembering the structure of the periodic table, you realize that chlorine, fluorine, iodine, and bromine are all halogens. So options A, B, and C, and D are all incorrect. And oxygen is the correct answer, therefore. So, and because oxygen is the 6th main group of the 17th vertical column of the periodic table, so not an halogen, and correct answer is letter A. The third one, it says, which one of the following molecules is a structural isomer of 2,4-dimethyl-2-pentene? And then you have the alternatives. In order to solve this question, you have to remember that a structural isomer is a type of isomer in which molecules with the same molecular formula, but they have different bonding patterns. So you have to find an alternative. Those are the alternatives that has this formula, because this is the formula of the compound the question was talking about. In order to do this, you just have to develop these names. You're gonna count the chains, count the carbons in the chains, observe the name, how the bonds are structured, and then you're going to obtain the molecular formulas, and you have to find the one that's equal to this number. So, and this is the answer number, letter C. So this is the correct answer. So letter C is the correct one. The fourth question says, a compound consists in 3 benzene rings joined together. Which of the following could be the formula? So you have, okay, those are the alternatives. So this thing over here is a benzene ring, and the question saying about 3 benzene rings joined together. You could draw it this way, or you could put this third one in this position. Those are isomers. It doesn't really matter how you draw them. It's just a matter of curiosity. But yeah, so you have to draw it, and then remember that every little corner, like these little pointy things, are a carbon atom, and every carbon atom makes 4 covalent bonds. Remember that these lines over here represent bonds. So this is a double bond, this is a single bond. And because they make 4 bonds, you have to have hydrogen. And then thinking of all these, you just count these structures, carbon, 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 and then you add the omitted hydrogens, and you obtain this molecular formula, which is B. So over here, you can see here, that is letter B. Okay, the 5th one. Alcohols can be oxidized to their respective carboxylic acid with 2 consecutive oxidation processes. Which of the following properties of the alcohol is necessary for the aforementioned process to occur? Letter A, the alcohol needs a chloride in the alpha position. B, the alcohol needs to have at least 3 carbon atoms. C, the alcohol must be tertiary alcohol. D, the OH group, hydroxyl group, needs to be close to an acid carbon. E, the alcohol must be primary alcohol. So quick review before. Alcohols are organic compounds that carry at least 1 hydroxyl functional group bound to a saturated carbon atom. Moreover, alcohols can be divided in primary, secondary, and tertiary depending on the number of carbon atoms bound to the central carbon, which is this one, a function. So a primary alcohol has only another carbon atom bound to it. A secondary is bound to 2 others, and a tertiary is bound to 3. All of them have to be bound to a hydroxyl group. So primary alcohols can be oxidized to aldehydes and further to carboxylic acids using an oxidizing agent. This unfortunately is not possible with secondary alcohols, these ones, which can only be oxidized to ketones. The only possible way to oxidize a ketone to a carboxylic acid is breaking a CC bond, carbon-carbon bond, which will result in a shorter acid. This is kind of tricky to happen because this bond is super stable. So it's much easier to just break a carbon-hydrogen bond. That's why the correct answer is E. Over here, you can see the sequence. Forgot to say that. You can see the sequence. Those were supposed to be arrows. So starting from methane, you have a primary alcohol, an aldehyde, carboxylic acid, and then it can be oxidized to carbon dioxide. Same thing over here. Secondary alcohol can become a ketone. Considering all this, you realize that the correct answer is E. So over here, E. The last question that I'm going to solve about the reaction, magnesium, so in solid state, plus copper ion, aqueous state, becomes magnesium ion and copper and solid. Okay, so first information is it is a heterogeneous reaction. Magnesium ion is oxidized and copper is an oxidizing agent. And then it asks which one of the following statements, these ones, are correct. Okay, so here you have the reaction. You can observe that this reaction is a redox reaction. So magnesium has its oxidation number increased to 2. It was 0, 2. So it's an oxidation. And copper had this number 2 and became a 0. So it decreases, which means this copper here, is suffering a reduction. Okay, so if we write the equation like this, we will realize that copper ion gained electrons, so this makes copper reducing agent. On the other side, magnesium gave electrons to copper, so it's oxidized. first and second statements are correct, and the third statement is wrong. First statement is true because on the left side, magnesium is solid and copper is in aqueous solution. So you can see that there's two physical states, which means that it's an heterogeneous solution. And on the other side, this is the contrary, so they kind of switched, right? And this makes the solution heterogeneous, and the correct answer is A. Okay. Oops. So I finished mine, and now I will pass the word for my colleague Yusuf. He's going to correct the other chemistry questions. Bye.
Okay, my name is Yusuf. I'm first year medicine student. So let's start with 47th question. 50 milliliters of a 0.8 molar hydrochloric acid solution are diluted with H2O until a final volume of a quarter liter has been reached. Determine the pH and concentration. As you can see the answers. So if we make the math, we have to write this equation: mass times volumes equals to N, and remember to convert milliliters to liters. And now the log is 0.1 is 1, so 0.2 should be less than 2. So our answer is C. A second. Okay. In which of these compounds does carbon have an oxidation number of 3? I don't know, to be honest, what's the name of these compounds. So response to A and C both have a carbon atom with an oxidation number of +4. To note, X is the oxidation of the carbon atom, and the number to the right of the equal sign of the initial equation is the total charge of the compound. Response B and C both have a carbon atom with an oxidation number of +2. Response D, also known as the cyanogen, is the only correct answer because of its chemical structure, which is, as you can see, since the two carbons have obviously the same element, they don't cause any change in each other's oxidation number. Nitrogen, on the other hand, causes carbon to increase its oxidation number by 3, since nitrogen wants 3 electrons to reach a full valence shell. Because of the oxidation number of carbon here is +3. This answer could also be reached by simple elimination by the other options, and our answer is D. 49th question. A fixed amount of helium is present in a container at a 1 atm pressure and it's 25 Celsius degrees. What's the final temperature of the gas if it undergoes an isovolumetric transformation and its final pressure at 2.5 atm? A, 745 Celsius degrees, B, 472 Celsius degrees, C, 472 Kelvin degrees, D, 62.5 Kelvin degrees, E, 62.5 Celsius degrees. So in order to solve this problem, the relationship between P pressure times volume divided by temperature equals to last pressure times last volume divided by last temperature is used. To obtain the result, one must plug the information given in the formula, remembering that the temperature must be in kelvins and that the volume remains constant during the transformation. If we do the math, we will find our right answer is B, which is 472 Celsius degrees. In which of these compounds the oxidation numbers are wrong? The most important rule to remember is that in a compound, sum of the oxidation number is 0 unless it's a charged molecule, as non-oxygen has -2 as oxidation number. There are few exceptions though. One of those exceptions are peroxide. A peroxide is a chemical compound in which there is a covalent bond between two oxygens due to that particular bond. Oxygen gains +1 as oxidation number. In potassium nitrate, potassium has +1 as all the elements of the first period. Nitrogen has +2, which is one of the possibilities, and oxygen has +1 in potassium. +1. In potassium nitrate, there are no bonds between oxygen, so the oxidation number can't be +1 even though some is 0. When hydrogen is bonded with metals such as lithium, its oxidation number becomes -1. As regards, I don't know that compound, phosphorus has +1. It's not very common, but it's one of the possibilities. So our right answer is C. Which of the following lines contain homogeneous mixtures only? First line, wine, pancake, syrup, and natural gas. Second line, spray paint, smoke, and air. Third line, fog, blood, and granite. Fourth line, coke, hydrogen peroxide, and mayonnaise. Fifth line, milk, oil paint, and bronze. So you can see the chart or table, whatever it is. Note, emulsions are part of colloids. Heterogeneous mixtures are made by components that can be distinguished with human eye or microscope. So our right answer is A. And last question. What is the electron configuration of a natural atom of scandium? The question can be resolved simply by counting the numbers of electrons and remembering the positions of various elements on the periodic table. We can calculate the total number of electrons by adding all the electrons in the different orbitals together. As you can see the example. With this information, we can find out what atom correlates to each option. Option A is fluorine, option B is bromine, option D is cadmium, and option E is iron. The answer is option C. It has 21 electrons, which is the same amount that natural atom of scandium has. So our answer is C, as you can see. Thanks for your attention. Now it's time for physics and mathematics. So have a nice day.
Hello, my name is Angelica. I'm from second year, and I'll be correcting the math problems. So let's start. Here we are. So the first problem was a tank has the shape of a rectangular solid. 37 hectoliters of water have been poured in it. Knowing that the external sizes are 314, 164, and 114 centimeters, and that the solid is 7 centimeters thick, how many more liters are necessary to fill it? What helps us to resolve this problem is this picture. First of all, I drew, so this blue rectangular represents the part of the solid in which water can be poured. Instead, the orange rectangular represents the total of our solid. As we can see, each side has 14 centimeters less than the original data. So it is important that we subtract 14 centimeters to each measure. So we'll have for AB 313 minus 14, which gives us 300 centimeters. The other side is 164 minus 14 and gives us 150. And the height of the solid is 114 minus 14, which gives us 100. And so it is easy to see that we are given data which are easy to deal with mentally. The formula for the volume is the area of the base times the height of the solid. So we'll have 300 times 150 times 100. And it gives us 4,500,000 centimeter cubes. The difficult part of this problem was to remember that actually 1 liter corresponds to 1 decimeter cube. So we'll have to convert our centimeter cubes in decimeters. First of all, we know 1 decimeter corresponds to 10 centimeters. So for the inverse proportion, we'll have to divide times 10. Thus, we must remember that here we are dealing with centimeter cubes. So we'll have to divide it for 1000 and not just for 10. So we have this final number, which is 4,500 decimeters, which corresponds to the equals of liters. We know originally there were 37 hectoliters poured. If we convert hectoliters to liter, considering that 1 hectoliter corresponds to 100 liters, we obtain 3,700 liters. So we have to subtract to the total capacity, which was 4,500, our number 3,700. And so we'll obtain 800 liters. So the correct answer was letter A. This other problem gave us this graph, and we must understand which is the equation that describes our graph. First of all, at an early site, we can see that it must be an inverse function, not as the typical one with the y variable. In fact, these first two graphs are the normal graphs for the cotangent and the tangent, and we see that the curves are quite vertical. Instead, the curve we are given is horizontal. So we can surely exclude letter B and C, which gave us the function written as y equals to x. Now we must understand if it is a cotangent, tangent, or sin. We can exclude the sin function since it is more of a curvy line. Instead, our is more of a plain line. And to distinguish finally between a tangent and a cotangent, it is important to see what happens around point 0. We know a tangent of 0 is 0. Instead, we can't actually find the tangent or the cotangent of 0. From the graph, it is highlighted since we see actually we never reach the number 0, but we go very close to it. This is because the cotangent is written as the cosine over the sine. And given that the sine of 0 is 0, and we can't divide a number by 0, it doesn't exist at the cotangent of 0. So we understand that the correct answer was letter A. At this point, we have a probability problem. A dice has 12 faces, numbered from 1 to 12, and the 12th face has twice the probability of the other face to show up when the dice is rolled, which is the probability to get a multiple of 4 or 6 rolling the dice once. We can explicit the fact that the 12th face has twice the probability to show up as considering our total of faces as 13, and each number has 1 over 13 the chances of showing up. Instead, 12 has 2 over 13 the chances to show up. At this point, we can calculate the result in 2 different ways. Or we consider the total of the multiples of 4 or 6, which are 4, 6, 8, and 12. 4, 6, and 8 will have 1 over 13 the chances of showing up. So we'll have to sum these probabilities. And then we consider 12 with 2 over 13 the chances of showing up. So summing our 4 numbers, our 4 fractions, we'll get 5 over 13. Another way of solving this problem was to consider separately first the multiples of 4 and then the multiples of 6. The multiples of 4 are 4, 8, and 12, which actually are 3 numbers. but we write 4 since 12 has always twice the probability of showing up. The same is done for number 6. So we'll have 6 and 12 as multiples of 6, and we consider 12 with twice the probability. So we'll have 3 over 13 the times of showing up. Summing all our numbers, we must pay attention that we consider 12 in both our lists. So it is important to subtract once the probability of showing up 12. And so from the sum of 4 over 13, 3 over 13, and then subtracting 2 over 13, we'll obtain 5 over 13. This means the correct answer was letter C. The last math problem was about writing an equation, and it told a dive resort rents scuba equipment at a weekly rate of $150 per week and charged $8 per tank of compressed air used during the week. Write an equation to represent the diver's cost. Just reading this text, we understand that there is a constant number, which is 150, and it corresponds to the minimum you have to pay to rent the equipment. So our interest is to find y as the total cost of the equipment. Then we consider x as the number of tanks used during the week. Because it is a variable, we, for example, our man borrowed 8 tanks. So we'll have to write the total cost of the equipment equals to 8 times the tanks, so 8 tanks, plus the constant cost, which is 150. And so the equation is written as y equals 8x plus 150. And this gives us the correct answer, which is number D. At this point, I finished and I pass over to physics.
Hello, everybody. I'm Federico, and together we're going to take a look at the physics questions. So, just a second. There we go. Let me change my mouse pointer to pen real quick. Oh, that's all right. So the first question asks, the light bulb in your room has an electric power of 100 watts, and on average it stays on 3 hours a day. You decide to switch to a low wattage model with a quarter of the electric power, so 25 watts. If in your house the cost of 1 kilowatt hour is $0.50, how much money do you expect to save over a period of 30 days? Now, watts is the International System Unit for power and is obtained by dividing joules, which are the unit of energy, as you know, by seconds, which are the unit of time. So it represents energy over time. In our case, the electric power of the light bulb indicates the amount of energy measured in joules consumed by the light bulb every second. So if we get a lower wattage model, we indeed save energy. So we can say that answer D, which states that you spend more money because lower power means lower efficiency, is wrong. So to solve the problem, we just calculate the energy we save by using the new model and then multiply it by the cost of 1 kilowatt hour. So the energy saved, notice that we label energy as W, do not confuse that with the W we use for watts, which are the unit for power, which is labeled as P. So the energy saved is the energy used up by the old model minus the energy used up by the new model. And since power is defined as energy divided by time, energy is power multiplied by time. So we have the power of the old model times the time minus the power of the new model times the time. Now, the time is the same in both cases, so the expression becomes the time, which is this, multiplied by the difference between the two powers. So the time is 30 days in 1 month, multiplied by 3 hours in a day, which is the time the light bulb stays on average every day, multiplied by 3,600 seconds. The power is 100 watts minus 25 watts, so that is 75 multiplied by 30 multiplied by 3, which is 6,750 times 3600. Now, the reason why I left the result as a product is because we need to convert this from joules to kilowatt hour. Kilowatt hour are a unit for energy, just as joules. They are defined, as you can read here, as the amount of energy absorbed by a device with a power of 1000 watts during 1 hour. So 1 kilowatt hour equals 1000 watts times 3600 seconds, or 3.6 times 10 to the 6 joules. So now we can calculate the amount of energy we saved. That is the energy expressed in joules divided by 3.6 times 10 to the 6 joules per kilowatt hour. This is the energy expressed in kilowatt hour, multiplied by $0.50 per kilowatt hour. So these two cross out. We can cross these two out as well. So basically we're doing 6.75 divided by 2. That is about $3.4. So A is the correct answer. Moving on, the flow capacity rate of the aorta vessel is Q equals 80 cubic centimeters per second. What's the speed of the blood in the small arteries, knowing that the aorta vessel splits up in 200 small arteries, each of which has a section of 20 square millimeters? Now, the flow is defined as the product between the speed of the fluid and the normal section of the pipe being the normal section being the section which is perpendicular to the velocity of the fluid. Now, the flow must be conserved throughout the pipe. That is a direct consequence of the principle of conservation of mass. So the same amount of fluid, in this case, the same amount of blood going through the aorta is the same blood going through the small arteries. So if we calculate the flow inside of the aorta, and then we calculate the flow inside of each small artery, these two quantities should be the same. Now, just a second, because my computer is almost out of battery, so I'm gonna plug it in real quick. Sorry about that. All right, so as I was saying, if we calculate the flow inside of the aorta and the flow inside of each inside of all the small arteries, these two quantities should be the same. So the flow inside of the aorta, as I said, is the speed, is the data we already have. The flow inside of all the small arteries is the speed of the blood inside one small artery, which is the thing we need to find, multiplied by the section of one small artery, multiplied by the number of small arteries. So really, all of these small arteries behave like one large blood vessel with a section of 200 times the section of one small artery. So to calculate the speed, we just use the inverse formula. So the speed of the blood inside one small artery is the flow inside of the aorta divided by the section of one small artery multiplied by the number of small arteries. So it is 80 cubic centimeters per second divided by 200 times 20 cubic millimeters. So 20 squared millimeters. 20 squared millimeters equals 0.2 squared centimeters. So the result is 2 centimeters per second. So the correct answer is A. The third question asks, how many of the following units of measurement are equivalent? The first one is watts times seconds, then we have newtons times seconds, then newtons times meters, then joules, and then kilograms times meters over seconds squared. So there is really nothing else we can do but analyzing all the options and then comparing them to each other. The first one is watts times second. As I already said, watts are the unit for power, and power is defined as energy divided by time. So if we multiply power by time, we get energy. So watts times seconds equals joules. Then newtons times seconds. Newtons, as you know, is the unit for force. So we're multiplying a force by time. That is the definition of pulse, which is a different physical quantity from energy. Now, if you do the math, you'll notice that newtons, as you know, is kilograms times meters over second squared. So if we multiply that by seconds, we get kilograms multiplied by meters over second. So we get a mass multiplied by a speed. And that is the definition of momentum. So pulse and momentum have the same unit, and that shouldn't surprise you because Newton's the general expression of Newton's second law states that the pulse of a force equals the variation in momentum. The third one is Newton's times meter. So it's a force multiplied by a distance, a displacement. And that is the definition. That is what we do when we are calculating the work of a force. And the work is a kind of energy. So work is usually measured in joules. So this quantity and this quantity are equal to each other. Note that usually, as I said, work is measured in joules, but really when we calculate the work of a force, so when we use the scalar product between the force and the displacement, we usually leave it as Newton's times meters. We do not write joules, but know that these two things, these two expressions are equal to each other. Then the fourth one is joules, and as I repeatedly said, joules are the unit for energy. And then we have kilograms times meters over second squared, which, as you know, is the unit for equals newtons. So this is the unit for force. So if we do a quick recap, we have watts times seconds, which is energy. We have newtons times seconds, which is pulse. We have newtons times meters, which is work or energy. We have joules, which is energy, and we have kilograms times meters over second square, which is newtons. So three of these units of measurement are equivalent to each other, and so the correct answer is C. Then the fourth and last physics question is, what kind of thermodynamic process is described by the diagram? Is it a Carnot cycle, an adiabatic process, an isothermal process, an isochoric process, or an isobaric process? So we can tell that answer A is wrong because there is no cycle. A cycle means that the system ends up in the same place where it started. Now, in this case, the graph is volume plotted on the x-axis against pressure on the y-axis. So every point on this line represents a possible state of our system. A Carnot cycle, a cycle in general, means that the system ends up in the same place where it started from, and we can tell that this is not the case. So even if you didn't know what a Carnot cycle is, you would be able to tell that this answer is wrong. Same goes for isochoric process. Isochoric process means that the volume of the system stays the same, but we can see that the volume, which is plotted on the x-axis, changes. Same goes for isobaric process. Isobaric means that the pressure stays the same, but we can clearly see that the pressure changes. So this leaves us with two possible answers, isothermal process and adiabatic process. Isothermal means that the temperature stays the same. As we know from the ideal gas law, the temperature is directly proportional to the product between pressure and volume. So if the temperature stays the same, that means that the product between pressure and volume, which are the two variables we are plotting against, we are plotting against each other. That means that the product of pressure and volume must be constant. And we know what the graph of two variables, whose product is constant, looks like. That is a hyperbolic branch. If you took the equation x times y equals k, where k is a constant, you would get an hyperbole. So the graph of an isothermal process looks like an hyperbolic branch, and this very much looks like an hyperbolic branch. So this is a very plausible answer. Then we have adiabatic process. Adiabatic means that the system doesn't exchange energy with the environment, and the graph, the diagram of an adiabatic process looks very similar to that of an isothermal process, but it is not an hyperbolic branch. It goes down a little bit more quickly. So even if without any additional data, we cannot really be sure this really looks like an hyperbolic branch. So isothermal process is the most plausible, and so the correct answer. So here you can see all of these hyperbolic branches. Each one of these represents an isothermal process, but at a different temperature. So here is a nice recap. We get the isobaric process where the pressure stays the same, so it is a horizontal line. We have the isochoric or isovolumic process where the volume stays the same, so it is a vertical line, we have the isothermal process, which is a hyperbolic branch and where the temperature is constant. And we have an adiabatic process, which, as I said, looks very similar, but it is not a hyperbolic branch. It goes down a little bit more quickly. So again, the most plausible, and so the correct answer is C. That was the last question for today. So I hope the simulation was useful and that the correction was interesting and insightful. And if you have any questions, please make them. We'll try to answer them at the best of our possibilities. But anyway, thank you all for your attention, and we hope to see you soon in the next simulation.